All right, hi everyone. In this lesson, we're going to talk about how to invest in the S&P 500 per year. Okay? So, if you're going to really invest in the S&P 500 per year, I mean, you can look at daily candles, but I would be looking at, let's say, more weekly or monthly because you're looking at the long term. So, we were looking at 1980, but even then, I mean, if let's say that the market was over here, remember it was bottoming and then it went down on February, and I would say this, by the time you can do several things. It's actually a bit similar to dollar cost averaging and averaging position within the years, only that this is much more in the long term. So there's two ways to go about this too, as well. One of the most practical ways, like one of literally the most practical ways to invest in the S&P 500 is to just invest in it regardless of where the share price is at. That means that whenever you have the money, just put it into the S&P 500, regardless of the time. Because look at what happened here. When the market was going up and up and up and up, look, it didn't even go towards the 100 moving average. It only hit the 50 and went up. And even then, it went down. So it really would have not mattered if you entered here or here. It just stayed there. And same thing happened over here. The price went down, right? But then afterwards, it went towards the same price and it just stayed here and it went up higher. Right? It kept going up higher and higher and higher. So that's what I'm saying. Like what you can do is if you're looking at this on yearly, you could say, all right, I'm gonna enter whenever. Right. So you're gonna enter whenever, wherever the price is at. So let's say you entered here. Right? When you entered here, the price was at 129 and it went down, right? And then you decided, okay, I'm going to enter here at 116, right? So net in total, you entered here and here, it would be, I mean, okay, that's an average price of about 122. So it'd be around there. So when the price was over here, obviously you were losing, right? But then look at where the price went then in a year later, it went to 144. So let's say net in total, each time you bought about 100 shares. This is just as an example. 100 shares here and 100 shares over here. If you have $6,000, like, I mean, in the year, if whatever, how much money you have, you put it there. So let's say in the year you have what I said, like $40,000, right? That you can invest $40,000 in the year. So you would buy here in the close 40,000 divided by 129.23. Actually, let me do this on this calculator. You guys can see 40,000 divided by this closing price, 129.23. You would buy about 309 shares. Right, so 309 shares over here. And when the price was trading right about there at 115, you would enter again with $40,000. 40,000 divided by 116.22, you would enter 344. So if I recall, well, actually, I don't have to. I can look at it in my history. So we've entered in total 309 plus 344. We entered about 663 shares. And the average price between them has been 122. So if the price goes up from here to 145, 145 minus 122, multiply that by, so you can understand what I'm doing. I'm grabbing the average price on both the purchases, which is the share price of 122, went to 144. What's 144 divided by 122 of the average price? It's about 18%. 18%, this amount. 144 minus 122, okay, 663. There we go. You want to know why? Because if you grab 144 minus 122, that'd be $22 of gain. There we go. So the profit that we're making is about 14,586. Okay, this is simple. Divide this by the, divide this by 80,000. There you go. You see, it's about 18% gain. Right, so if we grab this amount, right, our account now is worth about $94,000 when we invested 80. So you see, it's like an 18% gain, average in total. See, so this is it's really the same thing as dollar cost averaging, just per year, right? And that's a very powerful approach because it works the same way as dollar cost averaging, that you'll make more in the long term. Only that in this case, it's much more like it goes on for the long term, right? So you can lose if you're investing per year and the price goes up, but it goes down more than these prices. Of course, you will lose overall. So you see, like those are the risks about investing per year compared to investing every month, right? So what I'm trying to say is, look, if you want to not try to lose, if you're a very emotional person who really does not like to lose money, even though this is the long term for 30 years, I don't even know why you would be looking consistently in the market, and I don't want you to either. I mean, the only time you should be looking at the market is actually when you have the money in your hand and you put it in your brokerage account and you have to buy the S&P 500. Otherwise, you shouldn't even be looking at it if you're not let's say, doing any of this stuff, if you're too busy and you can't do anything and you just want to invest, you shouldn't even be looking at the market, right? Because you won't be influenced by it. But if you're this type of anxious person, which I can't even control because a lot of people are going to do that, the best thing that you should do is dollar cost averaging, because it's very hard for you to incur a loss in the long term. If you're doing per year, it's hard also, but it's much more easier to incur loss because you're literally entering per year. If the next year didn't go up but it went down more, you would be losing, compared to if you just averaged your dollar cost averaging for here and the price went up and it went down all the way to here. You won't make a loss at all. You'll make like a gain most of all. While yearly, you will be making like a slight loss, maybe 10, 15, 20, 25% loss around there. Yeah, that's how you do. It's the same way. It's like the same concept of dollar cost averaging, only this time you're really just entering anytime whenever you have the money. So really anytime is a good time, right? As soon as you have the money, invest it immediately, regardless where the share price is. Now I'm going to talk about another approach. Another approach could be like this. Let's say you're doing an investment per year. You're going to invest more when the price goes down. Let's say for this year, let's say the price was going up, right? And when the price went down and it went to, I can't give this an example because this isn't something, let's say, as realistic that goes on nowadays. Because look, the best example I can give you has been what's happened for the past 15 years. If you looked ever since the financial crisis, the markets have been going up at like waves, but it's been going up consistently. You haven't seen like those movements anymore from the 80s. It doesn't mean that they can't happen, but it's harder for it to happen now. So what I would say is this. I would say whenever the market gets close to the 20 moving average on weekly, that could be a good time to enter for this approach, right? When the market goes down to the 40 or 50 or anything below, you're going to be entering more. The same concept as what we do less per year, right? So what do I mean by this? Well, you will only invest one time per year. Let's say this, because I can't, the best thing that you should do is not, this doesn't mean that you should wait for a drawdown, right? What I just mean is that, look, if the price is coming down, right, and it's hitting a moving average it's just hitting a moving average and it looks to be rebounding, that should be the time when you enter more when it's a longer term moving average, deeper down. However, if the price is at the 20 moving average, you just invest as it is. But I would only invest when the price hits the 20 moving average in this concept. Not when it's going up, but when it hits the 20 moving average on weekly, right? Or the 20 moving average. When it hits the 40 or the 50 or the 100, right? Then you can enter more. So what do I mean this? If you entered in 2013 and you entered at the 20 moving average, you already filled your first position for the year. For the next position for the year, you can enter anytime when it hits the 20 moving average. So it was here. Let's say that you got the money, even though I don't know how, because it's been a little bit less than a year. Let's say realistically, you got it over here, the money. You were able to invest on August 2014, and you entered your full amount. By the next year, the price went down more, right? So you couldn't enter for that. I will talk about that later, other things that you can do, but you couldn't enter in this because you can only enter one time a year of the money. And then the next year, right, the price went to the 40 moving average and the 20, you entered again, okay? And then for the next year, the price hit the 20 again. So you see, like, as long as the price hits the 20, you enter. Now, if the price hasn't rebounded from the 20, but you see yourself that it's now, like coincidentally hitting the 100 moving average when you wanted to invest in, that's even a more incentive that you should want to try to invest more money. What do I mean by that? I know I said the 60-40 rule, but look, if the market is hitting a 100 moving average or the 150 or the 200 even, that's a stronger reason that you should enter with more than 40% of your entire money. Why? Because look, whenever the markets go down this low, especially on weekly, it's hard for the price to hit one of these moving averages because it's the long term. It's much more the long term. And this is a downtrend. This doesn't look much of a downtrend to you, but if you look on this on daily, this is a downtrend. And look, the more the price hits these longer term moving averages, and I love looking at this on weekly because it looks so much more solid and you don't get involved with confusion. It looks clear. When the price hits these moving averages, I would say this: try your best to, instead of investing 40%, when the price hits here, invest 50%. If the price hits over here, invest 55%. If the price hits here on the 200 moving average, invest 60%. So what do I mean by this? So if you're making $120,000 per year, your total expenses should be, in this case, for the 40-60 rule, usually your 60% are the expenses. So 72,000, make that per month, you're paying $6,000 per month. So you're living, a pretty cheap expense, to be honest. You know what, let's say let's say $8,000, let's say $9,000, because that's usually what people, or let's say 10,000 by 12. Okay, so you need to be making by average $200,000 to live like that. $10,000 per month on expenses. You should be then making $200,000 in sales or whatever you do in total income to cover everything. That means 40% of this would be $80,000. Now, what I mean when I talk about $10,000, $9,000, I'm talking about a family. I'm just talking about a family because that's usually a lot of people get families, right? So that's the best way. $80,000. So you put in $80,000. Now, this is why I always recommend you to just, I'm saying that you should live on the 60%, but I don't, I look, when I say the 60%, so you can understand what I mean by all this. When I talk about this rule, I'm only talking for the people who are living off of necessary expenses. But like, let's say you're a person like me. I don't think there should be any reason that you should be spending like $10,000 per month on expenses. Like, do you live in a 4-bedroom house with, I don't know, like a high-end Maserati with whatever you're doing? Like, that's unnecessary. You want to live as cheap as possible because none of that stuff matters. Now, again, this is now personal because it now depends on your personal preference. But remember what I said, the more you can invest, the better. And what I can tell you for sure is this: if the market comes down like that, right, but you have all these expenses, here's the bad thing about having all these expenses. If you're a person who's not living off of necessity items, but your expenses are high, it's going to be much harder for you to invest more money in the future because you have liabilities. Trust me, it takes a while to take cover in liabilities, and the prices you saw right now are never going to be seen again 3 years later. So you need to keep in mind of that. Prices are always going to go higher and higher and higher. That's how the markets work, right? I don't know if there might be a recession, right? The probabilities are low for the price to come down lower for the next 3 years. But there's a 90% chance, almost a 90% chance that the price is going to go higher in 3 years. So that's why I'm telling you, if you can live frugal, regardless how much money you're making, it's the best approach because you're going to be able to make more money in the future by investing more when it happens. So this is what I mean. If you're a family, but even then, like, well, look, if you're a person like me, if you're a family, right? If you're a family, and let's say, I know some families, which is insane. I know some families that live off $20,000 per month, and they probably make like $30,000 per month, and their expenses are $20,000. So what you could say too is what that basically means is that they're living off almost 67% on expenses that are not necessary. I don't think a family needs to be living, unless if you have many children, right? But a family does not need to be lived in $20,000 by a normal circumstance. I know there's certain circumstance, and now it depends if there's medical bills and like extreme problems. I know how that's like. That's another case, right? But even if you have extreme problems, you can always reduce those expenses by. That's what we did. We changed enormously what happened, but you shouldn't live by that. You should look at the difference. Many years ago, I'm going to talk realistically. My family actually lived slightly above that, and they were things that weren't necessary for goals. They were just things that were caught up because of medical issues. So you want to know the expenses now? It's about almost 60% less compared to that. Look at that, 60% less. That's a huge advantage. That's why I'm going to go to this example again. If you're a family, right? And that's why I keep saying, if you can live off 60% of your income, that's perfect. But again, if you see that there's some items that aren't necessary in total, of course, like when I talk about necessary is vacation or trips or buying a new car, none of this stuff, unless if your car is broken down. I mean, that's just something you have to do. But I'm talking about necessary things. Those are expenses you always have to have. The other stuff like trips, look, you need to keep that aside because you're focused on making money. Really, you're focused on making money. I'm still focused on making money. So you need to keep your expenses low. And if you do this, instead of the 60-40 rule, if you can say like, okay, I can do the 50-50, right? And let's say that you're a family that makes $200,000 in a year, right? But if you can keep your expenses to to 8,000, you actually reduce your expenses by 20%. And that's a good advantage. You want to know why? Because of this. Let me show you. Look, your expenses are 48%. What that means is that you're going to be able to maximize. Look, you're going to be able to invest 52% into the markets. So what I would say is this. Let's say there's a case where, okay, you're seeing that now. I don't want you to do this at the last moment. Like, I don't want you to do this. I don't want you to say, okay, the market's going down to, moving average. All right, I need to reduce my expenses. You do all as necessary. Now, that's fine, right? But I don't think many people are going to do that, are going to be able to do that in a single week, like all immediately to remove. What I recommend you to do is already do it now. That's why I keep saying, listen, the more you invest, the more money you will have. And you guys already have that in your brain. But seriously, that's just something basic, and it's just going to make you more money regardless of the way you do it. It's this simple. The more money you have in this, the more you will make out. If you see that you can reduce your expenses as lowest as possible, I'm not talking about that you should live in the streets and not live an enjoyable life. Listen, what I recommend to everyone is live a life that you enjoy with what you have around, but you're still productive all the time. I don't want you to live a life of relax and you're just staying there for days. No. You have to be productive every day. Have the things necessary that you have. Enjoy with what you have. Enjoy the usage of it, right? But don't buy items, right? Especially when you have to make money, right? You have to think about that first. Every time you buy something, you have to think, okay, is this going to make me more money? Right? If it's not, then think like, okay, but do I really need this? Is this something that I want, that it's going to make me happier for others? If it's going to make you really happy, then sure. I mean, I guess it's worth it, but you have to keep in mind that it's going to reduce the money you will make. So it's just that simple. No matter whether you're happy or not, your money is money. It's what it is. So if you find, like, with what you like and what you live, if you're able to reduce the expenses to 50% or lower, you're going to be able to increase. I'm talking about all expenses. Like, I'm talking about every expense that you're going to have to pay: mortgages, electricity, utility, car, groceries, travel, entertainment, whatever you're going to do as optional. But all these expenses, if you're able to reduce it to 50% of your total income, you're going to be able to completely have a cash flow on the outside, not cash, but cash to do something with it. And that cash automatically should be the first thing you invest into it, right? So what my concept is like this: let's say in this year, you reduced it to 50, like in this example, you have 52% to invest and you have 48% in your expenses. So if you're 48% in expenses, then I would do this simple rule: 48, 52. Why? Because 48 are your expenses and 52 is the investments of funds. So what I would say is this: only pay 48% on your expenses, and then the 52% put in your brokerage account. However, what I recommend to do is still invest, like, in your money if you had 40% of your income. So I don't know if you get what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is this: if you're making $200,000 a month, if you're making $200,000 per year, invest in it. Even though I know you can invest more because you reduce your expenses, still invest in it in the first batch if it's hitting the 20 moving average as 40%. So you would put in $80,000, right? Even though you have about $104,000. So really what this means is that you have about $24,000 in extra. What do I mean by that? This is great because, look, let's say that this also gives you an advantage. Let's say that the price hit the 20 moving average. But look what happened when the price hit the 50, right? Instead of the other person who couldn't do anything about it because they put all their investments here because they already paid all their expenses, they don't have any money left. But you, on the other hand, held it $24,000 still left because you only put in $80,000 here. So look, what would happen is by the time when the price rebounds from a stronger support, whether it's the 50, 100, it doesn't matter. Whatever you have as remaining cash, automatically invest it there, right? Because you're going to make more money if you do that. And it's the same case here. Let's say you're able to do this again in the same year. A year later, let's say you entered, technically I call this the 50 moving average rebound because it's really close. So over here, I would have put $80,000 again. But when it hit over here, I was able to put in $24,000 again at a lower price. You see, so that gives you the advantage to enter at cheaper prices still. And look at this year. You were able to get your money again. By this year, you know what I would do? Because it's hitting basically the 200 moving average. Instead of I would say this: whenever the price is hitting the 150 or the 200 on weekly, what I would do is, instead of investing 40%, I would just invest the full amount in what you have as investment funds. So in that case, that was about 104,000. So I'd put 104,000 here and I would leave it around because it's a harder chance that the price will come down more. And even if the price comes down more, I don't even care if I'm going to get money the next year. Do you see the concept? That's why I keep saying, look, the more you can invest, the better. And in total, you actually see that in general, you are actually investing more when the price comes down. Because if the price was open the next year, when you get your income the next year, and the price is actually at a very low point, at a very strong support on weekly, you can actually enter more than usual. because you lowered your expenses. So that's what I talked about. And you just keep doing this all the time. You entered here, the next year you entered here, the next year you entered here, and then you entered again here with the cash. The next year you entered over here, and then look at this. I would even say this. If on weekly the price goes down even more, of course you can't do much about it. I don't recommend you to go on margin or nothing like that. Like, don't leverage or anything. But look, when the price goes down more, try to, if you can, lower your expenses more. Because this is why I just keep saying, look, when the price goes down, the more likely you're never going to see it again. And I don't think we're ever going to see that. Honestly, I don't think we're ever going to see this price that we had back in COVID. That's just what it is. Why? Because we never have gotten the price of what the stock market was at in 2008, 5 years later. So I think that's always going to be like that way. And that's why you have to be very careful and understand, like, okay, the price is coming down. Let's invest a lot more because it's likely to go up. I've pretty much summed up per year. This is the same case if you're going to do 5 years or 10 years, because I talked about before, if you're doing for 10 years, really, look, if you're doing for 10 years, I don't think there's much tricks or strategies that I could tell you, because it really doesn't matter of what you do in 10 years. I really just say that if you have the money by 10 years later to invest fully, then invest wherever the price is at, because it's likely to go up higher. And that's the same case for 5 years. But if you're investing per year, I'd recommend either the way that I told you first, which is kind of like dollar cost averaging, which is like entering, every year, regardless of where the price is at, or entering when the price has hit the 20 moving average. And what I told you in extra, if you're able to lower the expenses, enter more when the price comes down. When that price goes down even more, try to enter more than what you saw, right? So 52% was for investments on total income. If the price goes down more, see if you can kind of like reduce your expenses from 48 to now consuming 45 or 43, because that will increase your investment fund by maybe like 5 to 6%. So instead of investing 52%, you're now investing 58% of your total income. So you see, the more you can invest, the better, because the more likely, especially when the price is coming down, the more likely it's going to shoot up and you're going to buy the lowest price ever. And you're going to make already a gain when the price went to the top. That's the great thing about the stock market, because here's the trick. Let me show you something that many people don't understand. When the stock market goes down by 50%, let me give you a test. When the stock market is at $100 and it goes, or 100 points, and it goes down to 50 points, that's about a 50% drawdown. Now tell me this, how much would it take in percentage for 50 to go to 100? I'll give you about 5 seconds. Okay, pretty sure you thought of the answer. All right, I'm going to say right off the bat, it's 100%. It's not 50%. No, because look, 50 times 50% is $75, 75 points. So you see, in order to go back to 100, you actually need to make 100%. You need to make double. It's 100%. Well, yeah, because this is a calculator, but you can understand what I'm saying, right? And that's very important. That's what many people don't understand, and this is a huge rule that I always talk about in trading. That's why you never want your account to come down, especially when you're doing percentages allocation rather than cash. That's why in trading, I never risk more than 3% of my account. And when it comes to investing, you don't care about this actually, because I don't care if my account goes down to 80% or even 90%. I don't care at all, because this is investment. I'm not buying stocks, I'm buying businesses. What the stock price shows me to go down 90%, a lot of the times it's not going to be the actual business that's actually losing money. It's actually that people are pessimistic on the business by something that's irrational. You see the difference there? And I'm going to talk about this so many times in the future, but that's what makes billionaires, because you're buying a huge discounted price never seen before, like over here, when everyone thinks the world's going to end, and you end up being richer than anyone else because you bought at a cheaper price. And that's why I like to do this method too. But that's important to understand, that when 100 goes down to 50, it's not, you can't make 50% to go back to 100. You need to make 100% to go to 100, right? And this just becomes better when the price comes down even more, because if the price went down by 80%, it's at 20 points. You can't, look, in order to go back to 100, you can't make 80%. You actually have to make about now 500%. You see, 100. So basically, in a way of saying is like this. If you saw that the S&P 500, which isn't necessary, but I'm just showing you this as, I do this with businesses. I don't do this for the S&P 500, but I'm just showing you this so you guys can understand the concept. Let's say the intrinsic value or the fair value of the S&P 500. I'm not saying that this is the fair value, but I'm just saying this as a demonstration. Let's say the fair value here was 3,200, right? 3,200. And look, the price went to over here. Let's say you bought it over here, 2,000, or let's say over here, 2,500. So what's 2,500 divided by 3,200? Okay, that's about a 21% drawdown. How much would it take for 2,500 to go back to 3,200? So it'd be it's basically 3,200 divided by 2,500. Look, it's about 28% gain. You see, you're actually making more. Look, the price went down by 21%. But look, you're guaranteed to make 28%. That's the value of investing when things are cheap. Not when they're cheap in the stock price. Because people, when I say cheap, people are referring like, oh, okay, the price, instead of being at 300, it's at 20. No. Many people, I think that's just ignorance that people don't understand that. And plus, I don't look. It's fine if you're ignorant because you don't have the understanding and knowledge. For example, a company. Many people say that Bank of America is cheap compared to JP Morgan because JP Morgan cost about $137. If you compare that with BAC, it costs $28. Right? So people might be going, I'd rather enter in BAC, right? It's much more cheaper. No, it's not cheap. That's not what cheap means. Just because the share price is lower does not mean it's cheap. Why? Because in order to define, you cannot compare a business to another business. The reason why Bank of America is worth less in its share price compared to JP Morgan is not because JP Morgan is more expensive or has more value compared to Bank of America. It just means that Bank of America might have more shares outstanding compared to JP Morgan because they relatively should be making somewhat around the same amount of money. They're both banks. Banks don't really make a huge difference, especially Bank of America and JP Morgan. I'm talking about big banks. I'm not talking about any bank in the world, but I'm talking about big prestige banks like Bank of America and JP Morgan. They don't make a huge difference of profits. So by that nature, JP Morgan and Bank of America should really not be costing any different from each other. But the only reason they do is because Bank of America might have more shares outstanding compared to JP Morgan. Why is that important? Because let me show you a demonstration so you guys can understand companies and stocks. If a company is worth $10 billion, right? This is 10 billion, and they're giving out 10 million shares, right? That means each share price is worth $1,000. Now, why you might be saying, why is it worth $1,000? Well, because you're buying a portion of the business. The business is worth $10 billion. But how many certificates are there to buy the business? There's about 10 million shares. So that means you have a 10 millionth, because that's really what it means. You have a 10 millionth of a portion of that business. So for you to buy the worth of that business, the fair value of the business would be $1,000 per share. Why? Because if you grab $1,000 and multiply it by 10 million shares, that's about $10 billion. It's what the business is worth. So that's very important. Let's say that was the case for JP Morgan. It costed $10,000 because there's only 10 million shares and it's worth $10 billion. But let's say Bank of America is also worth $10 billion. But in this case, they have about, now instead of 10 million shares, they might have like, maybe 70 million shares. So look, you see, it's actually worth $142. Rather, JP Morgan's worth $1,000. But why is Bank of America worth less? Or worth less? Why is each share worth 140 and JP Morgan's worth 1,000? It's not because Bank of America is cheaper. It's just because Bank of America has 70 million shares. So that means there's more people that can own the business, and Bank of America compares to JP Morgan. That's all there is, right? But the same worth per share, right? What does that mean? I'm showing this for examples, but I'm just going to show you this as an example, as a demonstration. This isn't a fact or anything like that. I'm just showing this for just demonstration. What this basically means is that if JP Morgan is $1,000, if it's worth $1,000 per share, basically, in order, if you want to get the same worth in Bank of America to buy for JP Morgan, you have to probably buy 8 shares of Bank of America to be equivalent the worth of what you have in JP Morgan. Right? But that doesn't mean that JP Morgan's worth more. It just means that the amount of shareholders there are less, which means you get to own a bit more actually of the business, in a way of speaking. Right? But not really, because in total, look, you can just buy 8 shares and you'll be worth the same as the JP Morgan guy. And the JP Morgan guy, it's also the same thing. So you can understand what that means. If the price is going down more, that's when you should invest more. Right? And I think I've already summed up per year. That's all you do per year. And I've actually summed up all about index investing. Yeah, it's that simple. There's those 2 different strategies. One is less than a year, and one is if you want to do it per year, per 5 years, per 10 years, it doesn't matter. I really recommend you to not just buy once, obviously, because yeah, you can buy once and obviously you'll have money in the future. But remember when I said the more you can invest, the better. And are you really going to leave like $100 million in the table when you can invest $10,000? I'd rather invest $10,000 per year than invest it once, ever. I'll be more wealthier than the person who bought once by, well, simple math, 106 divided by 3. I'll be about 35 times more wealthier than that person. because I did it every year. So that's a big trick. That's a big advantage. All right, that's the end of index investing. Look, in the next video, I'll pretty much sum up what's the point of index investing and whether depending on your criteria, whether you should or whether it's better investing in businesses. All right. So, but at this point, we're now done with index investing. Also, if you're able actually to, this is only for the averaging position per year, right? When I talked about like, okay, you can enter here, and if you have the remaining cash, you can enter when it's lower, right? For the same year. One thing you can do though, however, is that let's say that you entered here because it was at 20 and then you entered again over here because it was at 150. I would do this. If you see a few weeks later that you can enter again at a stronger moving average, even though this is a downtrend but the price is lower, you can actually, what I'd recommend you, if you can do this, you're entering per year, but let's say the full amount per year, you already entered it full. But let's say if because obviously you have to pay your expenses. I mean, I'm pretty sure you have to be making money per month, something like that, or the money you currently have, right? So whatever money you have afterwards, after expenses, if you're able to get money out of that to invest immediately, similar like the less per year, if you're able to get money per month, right, and you're doing that per year, if you're getting money per month, if you got money a month later and you already have the cash, if you make $200,000 a year, obviously you're not going to pay all your expenses at the end of the year. You have to pay it per month. So you have to be making then around $16,666. Right? And then 60% of this for expenses would be about $10,000. If you grab 40% of this, would be 6,666. Okay, so what do I mean by this? You already invested here about, if I recall, $108,000 already for the year, because that's the amount that you can invest if you can invest more than 40%. Right? That's what I mean. And even then, right? This sort of way of doing things works if you're dollar cost averaging. Well, yeah, even if you're dollar cost averaging. What I would say is this. You can do this method on whatever strategy you're doing, anything that's more than less than a year, right? So if you're entering per year or more than a year, you can do this. Ideally per year. So what I mean is if you entered here and the second time you entered over here, let's say the price hit the lower moving average, right? It's obviously not a year later and you don't have the full amount. However, what I recommend you to do is that if you can do this in a month, which I'm pretty sure you can't because you have the income, you have to pay your expenses, 40% of that, or if you're investing more, whatever percentage you're doing, grab that full percentage and invest it immediately back into the stock market again. You want to know why? Because the more the price goes down lower, especially in the same year after hitting strong supports, it makes the probability higher extremely that it will go up. So remember that this isn't daily. This is on weekly, right? This is a pass because this was an actual economic problem. Like subprime mortgages, a very big problem. Over here, you don't have these big problems, right? And even if there is a big problem, it still doesn't matter because the market is unpredictable. You don't know what the market will do overall, regardless of circumstances. So you want to be entering regardless of where the share price is at. So you would enter here and you would enter here, right? That's for averaging position. If you have $6,600, by the time the price hits that lower moving average on weekly and rebounding, I would enter again on this week. That way, at least I have a position at a lower share price with money on the funds. So that's a big gain for the future to have, right? And then for dollar cost averaging, you can't enter obviously the 2 times normally, as if you lowered your positioning, right? If you're doing the 60-40 rule and you can't lower your expenses, you would be doing the normal investing, which is just 20 moving average and you just invest in there. Now, one thing you can do though is if the price goes to 20 moving average, but it goes to the 50 moving average, right? Between this time to here, or at least in the month, I would say the months. That's better. I would say over here or here, whatever money you made in the month over here, invest it on this one. It's the same concept as over here. I'm not saying the full money you made from A to B to fully. I'm just saying the money that you made a month here. Why? Because you still want to hold enough cash and gain on the cash so that you can invest the adequate amount the next year later. You still want to be on the game. You don't want to invest just even in the same year, because there's still probabilities that the price can go down lower and you can get a better price. I mean, yeah, for averaging position, for just, if you're only doing the 60-40 rule, that's perfectly fine per year. But if you're able to get the money you have in per month and invest it again on the same year if the price hits the stronger moving averages, which is the 50, 100, 150, or the 200. Now, for dollar cost averaging that you enter regardless of where the share price is at, I would only enter like this if the price hit the same thing, either the 50 or the 100. So if you entered dollar cost averaging over here, right, and then a year later you entered over here, but the price went down to this level again, it's the same thing. You just grab the money you made on the month, You don't want to grab this full money because it's still the same thing. You want to save enough temporarily so you can invest it eventually the next year. But in this one, you just want to grab the investing fund of the month, of the income on the month that you made, and invest it when the price was hitting the stronger moving averages. All right. So I just wanted to say that because I thought that that was important to specify, because I think it's very effective, because you're really entering all the times, but you're entering even when the price is cheap. I love this. Yeah, I love this. I love index investing because there's nothing better than it for the long term, at least in general, right? I always say this, like, look, if you really don't understand the stock market, if you don't understand it a lot like I do, look, the best way to get rich, the best way to get wealthy in the long term is literally putting really all your money into the S&P 500, because you're sure to get a return in the future. I mean, look, if you had $1 million, you put 400,000 every year. Look at what the return was 93 years later. You had about $4.2 billion dollars. And it's hard to get that amount of money for a millionaire, even investing it in other assets, because other assets don't give you the return compared to the S&P 500 in the overall. And second, when you don't invest your money, look, it would take you more than 4,000 years just to make $4.2 billion dollars. And technically, you won't be able to make 4.2 because of depreciation. That's all I wanted to talk about. And the next lesson, we'll go over kind of in summary about index investing, right? And what you can do compared to business investing.